All right, welcome to another episode of Black Swan Revelations. My name is Shane, and today we're going to be talking about the book of Psalms. We're going to do a little bit of a devotion this morning. I've had a few requests from people to every once in a while go back to the basics, if you will, go back to reading scriptures, and then, of course, you can go back to the crazy stuff. Aliens, drones, Cybertruck explosions, all kinds of crazy news. Like you can endlessly get lost in the news, but if you focus on God's word, there's lots of stuff in this Bible that you can basically just eat off of this daily and have enough to understand what's going on in the world and all this kind of stuff, and to keep you sane, really, at the end of the day. That's the goal. So I thought it'd be nice to dive into the book of Psalms because, again, this is the new year, so why not start things right with doing a little bit of a devotion as well. And maybe I'll explain a little bit about the book of Psalms, why it's great for devotions and all this kind of stuff. So without any further ado, let's just jump into this. Maybe it's kind of good, actually, just to share a little bit before I get into the book of Psalms, just a little bit about how I conduct myself early in the morning. So basically what I do is I get up anywhere from 5 to 6 o'clock in the morning, and then I will slot a time of usually a couple of hours. That doesn't necessarily mean I'm reading the Bible the entire time, but that is my time slot of where I make it a priority for reading my Bible. So sometimes I could be having porridge, I could be making breakfast or making some coffee, and then just getting everything ready to just sit down and read the Bible. But that's what I mean when I say I have a chunk of time. That is my devotional time, and sometimes it fluctuates. I would say safely between 6 o'clock and 9 o'clock is my fluctuation. And I don't have a time limit. I don't set a timer like I used to. Timers don't work for me at all. I used to try and use a timer, and I found what I was doing was I was looking at the timer, and then I'd flip through the Bible pages, and I'm like, okay, how many more pages do I have to read before I get to the end of the timer? And it just never seemed to flow for me. I could never get past reading 5, 10, 15 minutes, and I get sleepy. I get bored, all this kind of stuff. And I've shared my testimony as to how I was able to overcome that obstacle of just diving into the Word. And now it's just become a habit. It's like an atomic habit, if you will, where when I come downstairs, as soon as I start to make a pot of coffee, I'm already thinking about scripture. I'm already thinking about it. So one of the things that I like to do is I have these highlighters here. I don't know if you can see these here. These are highlighters that I use. I know it seems like there's a lot, right? 6 of them. And I just highlight as I'm going through the Bible, going through my devotions. So I will give you an example here. This is an example. This is where I'm at right now. Right here. See the different colors? Nothing too spectacular. I don't really have any rhyme or reason when I'm highlighting. Sometimes I'll just go through with like a pink marker, and I'll just highlight a few verses here and there that kind of stand out. And then if something that really stands out, I will use a different color marker like a blue or green, so that when I come back, I'll go, oh, this is interesting. Most of the pages are pink, but every once in a while he has green. What was it that he was highlighting? And that's pretty much how I do it. And I'll just, like, I've had this Bible now since November, and you can see the lettering is worn off already. It's either cheap imitation, or because I read it a lot, like right here on the side, you can see the King James, it's worn off. And even in the front of the Bible, look at this. Holy Bible, the B is actually starting to wear out. It's because I'm opening and closing this thing every single day, and when I hold it, I think some of the oil from your skin or something goes off on here, and that's what wears it down. Which is kind of interesting. How long have I had this for? November 27th is how long I've had this for. And it's a 12-point type font, so it's actually pretty nice. Only had it for just over a month, but I don't know if you could see that. It's kind of hard to see. And then another device I'll use. Another device besides my Bible, I will use my Amazon Fire tablet. And basically what I do here is I have the Bible. I have the King James Bible here with the Apocrypha here, and I believe it was free. I don't think I paid for it. I think it's free on Amazon. And you just are free in Kindle, I should say, and you just download it. And what I like to do is I like to read this with a tool called, let's see here, where is it? Where did it go? There it is. Okay. So right here, I don't know if you could see this. Hard to see with that light. There is a tool called Word Runner. So basically, click on that, and you can actually adjust your word count. You can adjust it. Let me turn off this light. Let's see if this works for a second. Does this work better? I know I'm dark, but at least you can see the image. And basically, if you can see that gauge, it says 475 right in the middle. On the right side of the screen, it says 900. You can actually increase your words per minute by playing around with this tool. So the average human reads about 200 words per minute, roughly. If you read an average of 218 words per minute, you can get through the entire Bible, the King James Version at least, without any commentary, reading 2 hours a day, 7 days a week in 30 days. I've studied this. I've practiced this. I've tried everything under the sun, but the average speed that you need is 218 words per minute in order to get through the entire Bible in 30 days. 30 days. Not very long when you think about it. That's not too long. We spend hours on things that are useless. Like useless. Like we just waste our time on stuff. Watching Friends, watching TV, sports, all this kind of stuff. And I'm not saying that there isn't a place for that. But if you want to get through the Bible, and I'm not even talking about speed reading. We didn't even talk about that. We didn't even talk about doubling. Like if you wanted to go through an audiobook of the Bible, it'll take you 66 hours approximately at 1.5 times speed to get through the entire Bible. If you 2 times it, which is reasonable, you can get through the Bible in between 40 and 50 hours. So that means if you like listening to the Bible throughout the day at your work, you can get through the entire Bible in 1 week. Now, my record for reading, physically reading, has been 30 days. I think I did it in like 21 days. But that was exhaustive. I was spending probably a couple of hours, 2 to 4 hours a day, I should say, every single day. And some days I would spend all day reading, all day, just reading from like 8 o'clock in the morning till 5 o'clock at night. And I remember one time when my wife drove to Regina, I believe, to go see her dad, which is like a 7-hour drive from Calgary. I remember standing at my island in my kitchen, and I said I was actually reading a book. I think it was called Good to Great or something like that by Jim Collins. And I said, I'm not going to sit down until I finish reading this book in one sitting. So it took me about just over 6 hours to read the book. And then my wife texted me saying that they're arriving. They're just driving into Regina, and I just finished the book. So I stood there, said goodbye to my wife, and it was just a secular book, read it, and then when she arrived at Regina, I was basically wrapping up the book, standing there. So you could use the skills that you get from reading the Bible to allow you to focus on things for longer periods of time. You could do this for any book as well, not just the Bible. But if you're used to sitting down for long periods of time with the Bible, you can now do other exploits. Like you can read a secular book for, instead of taking weeks to read a book, you can finish a book in 2 or 3 days. I read 5 books in 1 week. I'm not a speed reader. It's not about reading fast. It's just about reading systematically. And there's ways to do it. There's ways to trick your body into reading smarter, if that makes sense. Because what happens if you listen to an audiobook, you can speed it up. You can go 2 times, 2.5, 3 times. But what happens after a while is your brain has to catch up to that speed, and it sounds like a chipmunk after a while. And if you walk away and you come back to listening at that speed, say it's 3 times or whatever, you have to slow it back down and then ramp your brain up to speed, because otherwise it just sounds like a chipmunk. I actually remember being in a Petro-Canada gas station when I heard a chipmunk in the store, and I'm like, "What is that sound? It sounds like a high squeal, and I don't know what it is." But this lady walked by, and she had an audiobook on her phone, and she had the volume turned up, and she had it, like, at 3 times speed or whatever, and all you hear is just gibberish. I'm like, "Wow, is that an audiobook?" She's like, "Yeah, I'm just trying to finish up this book," or whatever. So you can get used to it, but it sounds kinda weird after a while because it sounds like a Smurf or something. So I used to do that 3 years ago, but now I just listen to anything I listen to in regards to audiobooks, it'll be usually around, 1.5 speed or 2 times because I wanna maintain the voice of whoever it is that's doing the reading. If it's Jordan Peterson, I wanna actually go 1.5 max because the guy speaks fast already. So in regards to reading, you read 2 times faster at least than what you listen to. That's the beautiful thing about reading. So if you're comfortable with reading at 2 times speed, you could read at 4 times speed. It's faster reading. But what happens to us when we're reading the Bible, I know this is supposed to be a devotion about Psalms, right? But hopefully this will help you read faster. So if you look at this, why I prefer a Bible that has 2 columns is because it's easier for you to read faster because you only have to read 3, 6, 7, 8 words instead of 15 or 20 words in one line. So what happens is your eyes start jotting. You start, if you don't use a finger or a pen or a ruler, what happens is your eyes will actually jot back to the previous 1 or 2 sentences because it's too much information for your eyes. Your eyes are trying to pick up the whole page, and you have to really concentrate on what you're reading. And sometimes that plays you out. It actually is exhausting. So this is why I use a highlighter, because when I use a highlighter and I just highlight a sentence here and there, I don't care if I highlight the whole Bible. There's something special about using a highlighter that actually allows you to focus. And I can't tell you how many highlighters I've been through in the last 3 years. Dozens and dozens of highlighters. I actually wore out one highlighter just in the book of Jeremiah alone. That just gives you an idea. And if you read the Bible over and over again, there's 66 books. I have a whole bucket of highlighters that I've actually worn out. I should throw them away. I really should. Because sometimes what happens is when I go up to the bucket, I'll grab a marker and I'm like, or a highlighter. I'm trying to highlight. Oh, that one doesn't work. Oh, doesn't work. I really should throw it away. Okay, this one works. Oh, it's dying on me. So I would suggest get rid of the old markers and just keep the new ones. All right. So again, why do I use this? Well, you could ramp up with Word Runner. You can actually ramp up. You can double your reading speed easily just by using this Word Runner tool. And it's not hard. It's not hard at all. So look at this here. Again, I'll show you how this works. If you think about sound, how we hear sound, it's one word after another. We hear sound one word after another when we are speaking. That's how we perceive language. It's one word at a time. You don't hear 10 people at once speaking to you different parts of a sentence because you'd be like, oh man, I don't understand what you're saying because they're saying different parts of the sentence. It's not how we pick up things. We have to, if somebody's speaking too fast, we tell them to slow down. So Word Runner mirrors this way that our brain operates by using this word runner tool. So for example, I'm just going to push play, and again I'll turn out the light and then we'll jump into Psalms. So if you hit word runner, it gives you a countdown, and it says, learning, understanding is a wellspring of life unto him that hath it, but the instruction of the fools is folly. The heart of the wise teaches his mouth, adding learning to his lips. Pleasant words are as a honeycomb, sweet to the soul, health to the bones. So if you do this, your eyes actually read faster than you speak. So that is at, what speed is that? That is really slow. It's at, what is it at? That was at 200. So let's speed it up to 250. This is 250 words per minute. Or he has a crown of glory, if it be found in the way of the righteous. He that is slow to anger is better than the mighty, and he that ruleth his spirit than he that taketh the city. And it just goes on. So that's 250. Right there, your eyes will actually speed up. You are now reading faster than the average human just by doing this one thing. And it actually fatigues your eyes less because your brain is focused on one word at a time, which is what it likes. It desires one word at a time. This is how our brain operates. So you can actually speed it up. And I've actually got it up to like 500 words a minute, but it takes you a bit to ramp it up. But once you get used to it, it's 500 words a minute, which means you could finish the entire Bible in 3 weeks just by doing that. That's 500. Now, some people can get up to 700. I've tried. It becomes a bit of a blur. If you look away, you're going to miss a whole paragraph. But it is possible. I've done it. It just, that tires you out. It plays you out doing it like this. I'm telling you. But 300 to 400 words, it's doable. It's doable. Because people wonder, they say, well, Shane, how can you get through the Bible so fast? Well, there's tools like Word Runner that you can use, especially if you want to go through the Bible in a month. If you have a Bible that has commentary, good luck. Good luck. It's not going to happen. You're not going to get through the Bible in 30 days. Why? Because you have to have absolute discipline to ignore the commentary, and it's not easy because you're going to come across something in Job and you're going to read Satan coming before Job, going to and fro the earth, and you're going to see a commentary that says this could be some kind of time travel or something. You're like, what? Wait, what? Time travel? What? You mean the devil's outside of time on earth? And you're like, wait a minute, I don't believe that. And you start looking up other things, and you find in Zechariah talks about carpenters shifting time and all this. Like, you're gone. You're gone on a bunny trail. Not good. This is why I don't like having a Bible with commentary, because you're going to get yourself distracted. Now, you don't have to do that all the time. You don't have to do it all the time. But once in a while, after you've done your devotional in the morning, feel free to jump into a commentary, go onto YouTube, watch other people teaching, whatever it is, whatever your heart's desire. But at the beginning, just focus on a Bible that does not have any devotion. All right, so now we're getting into Psalm. That only took 20 some minutes. We're into Psalms now. So how do you read the book of Psalms? You have to I'll give you a snapshot of how most people approach Psalms. They will approach Psalms from the perspective of worship. And that's it. Like, every time I read a Psalm, it's got to be worship. I have to worship the Lord when I'm reading a Psalm. I would suggest to you that though that is not a bad premise, you have to read the book of Psalms also in addition to as though you have newspaper clippings. Imagine the New York Times sitting down in front of you and somebody comes by and tears a piece off because they like a certain article on that day. They throw away the newspaper and they put that down. Another person the next day reads a different column in the New York Times and they go, "Oh, I like the sports section. That's kind of cool." Put that out. And then someone else reads an obituary and goes, "Oh man, this poem or this memory that someone wrote about their grandmother or grandfather is beautiful." Rip that out. And then you got a collection of news articles that you pass to someone else that is like a musician or a songwriter or a poet. And they go, "Oh, thank you for that." And then they start composing it. This is how we get the Psalms. So there's 5 books in the book of Psalm. Not sure if you're aware of that. There's 5 books. It's divided into 5 books. And I'm not going to go into detail on it, but just so you know, it's basically 5 sections of the book of Psalms. And the reason why I bring up the news clipping idea is because, for example, something brief. If you go into, let's see here. If you go to Psalm, I think one day I'm going to have to get another camera where you can see what I'm actually doing. But if you go to Psalm 42, I think it is, you get a psalm. This is from book 2. Excuse me. It's called Psalm 42, "My soul thirsts for the Lord." And you'll see, "To the chief musician, Maschil, and for the sons of Korah." Now, the sons of Korah, if you know your first 5 books of the Bible reading, your Torah, if you ever come across these sons, they were actually rebellious. Especially Korah himself was rebellious to Moses because he built the tabernacle and wanted everybody to fall in line with his teaching. He wanted everybody to follow him because he wanted to lead people back to Egypt because there was a rebellion going on. Also part of the tribe of Reuben as well, and I think Asher, I could be wrong about that. But they wanted to go back to Egypt because they basically said the cucumbers are better back in Egypt. So Moses argues with Korah saying, like, isn't it good enough that you're actually carrying the ark of the Lord? His family was responsible for carrying the ark of the Lord. They didn't get wagons like some of the other Levites did. Korah is one of the Levite sons, if you will. There's 2 others, and I forget the name off the top of my head. But Korah and his descendants were designated to taking care of carrying the ark, the burden of the ark, if you will. So after the Aaron would actually have his sons and cover up parts of the ark and all the furnishings and everything, they would cover them all up with ram skins and all this kind of stuff. Then Korah and his family would be able to pick it up and then carry it. Whenever the fire leaves, they would go. Whenever the fire stays, they unpack and they stay. So Korah was in rebellion, and then he ended up being swallowed by the ground. Not his kids, but all those that were in rebellion. I think there's like a few hundred anyway. Forget how many. But they got swallowed up. But their children ended up living and surviving and ended up documenting things and writing ways to worship God and all this kind of stuff. And some of these got entered into the book of Psalms. because not all the sons of Korah, not all the family of Korah rebelled. It was just Korah mainly. So moving forward, imagine descendants of Korah watching Korah himself get swallowed up by the earth, and then the ground closes up and everybody runs. Somebody's probably writing that down and keeping track of that and just writing it down and then just putting it in their pocket for later. And then a year goes by, 2 years, 10 years, whatever. Somebody's like, hey, this is a snapshot of what was kind of happening in that time frame when they would go fight Amalekites, when they would go into the promised land. We have all these little inscriptions, whether on stone, on parchment, whatever. Let's just gather all this stuff and let's just sort through it one day, and then we'll pick out some of the interesting things. Some were related to worshiping God. Some of them were angry towards God. Some were frustrated. Some of these articles were scared. People were scared that God had abandoned them. And somebody grabbed these all together and went, oh man, these are kind of cool. And King David wrote a bunch of Psalms himself, because he would be out in the mountains somewhere being chased down, hunted down by Saul, and he'd probably be writing something on a parchment, or maybe sharing his thoughts with some of his comrades. And then someone would keep track of that, write it down. And then eventually when he became king, there were people that were known as recorders, and they would record all this stuff down, most likely to maintain the history of the kingdom of Israel. And every once in a while, they would get little articles of stories of war, and they go, oh, that's interesting. Let me put that in here. Or they'll see something like King David asking God for forgiveness because of his adultery with Bathsheba. And he's like, oh, that's kind of interesting. It's not, doesn't make you feel happy, but this is raw emotion that our King David felt when he had Uriah the Hittite die, and when he was losing his unborn son, and he was praying to God in tears. Let's hang on to that one. Let's put that in the book of Psalms, because I think that'll help somebody down the road. And this is what they're doing. And they compiled like 150 Psalms. So if you go to, let's just say, for example, let's go to Psalm 61 for a second. If you look at this, verse 6, Psalm 59. Again, if you just read this on the surface level, you might miss this. God has spoken in his holiness. I will rejoice. I will divide Shechem and mete out the valley of Succoth. Gilead is mine, and Manasseh is mine. Ephraim also is the strength of mine head. Judah is my lawgiver. Moab is my washpot. Over Edom will I cast out my shoe. Philistia, triumph thou because of me. Who will bring me into the strong city? Who will lead me into Edom? Will not thou, O God, which hast cast us off? ? And thou, O God, which didst not go out with our armies? ? Give us help from trouble, for vain is the help of man. Through God we shall do valiantly, for it is he that shall tread down our enemies. So if you read that at just the surface level, you're like, oh, I'm not really sure how I should pray through that psalm. It's kind of like, feels like I'm giving glory to God, but I'm not sure about killing people and squishing people and throwing my shoe at them and all this kind of stuff. It's kind of weird. But if you picture the idea that the house of Saul in an earlier chapter, was out to get King David. So King David is in the mountains, he's in the rocks, he's writing the stuff down. Then there's another battle in Edom happening. And who's in charge of that battle? Well, Joab was in charge of several battles at this time, and he was under King David. This is not a righteous guy. For some reason, when we go into the Old Testament and we see Bible characters, historical Bible figures, we go, everybody in the Bible believes in God. Everybody in the Bible worships Jehovah God. Everybody in the New Testament is a Christian, is a believer at a surface level. But when you dig deep, you go, oh, wait a minute. Is there a chance that this person writing this psalm was going out to battle and he's kind of despising God a little bit, because we know Job was like this. Joab, not Job, Joab. Joab was a murderer. I believe he killed Abner. He killed Absalom. He had no problem killing Absalom when he was hanging in a tree with his hair, and his armor bearers, if you will, were hanging out. And he's like, why didn't you kill him? Why didn't you kill him? And they were too afraid. So then he grabbed a bunch of arrows and jabbed them into Absalom's heart and killed him. And then some messengers came back to King David and said that everybody fled at the dinner table, everybody is killed and all this kind of stuff. And then one of the servants of David said, no, not everybody's killed. Just one of your sons, Absalom, is dead. David tore his clothes and all kinds of stuff. But there was a huge battle going on. And Joab was not a righteous guy, because David said, do be kind to my son. Like, don't kill him. And Joab ignored it. He killed him. He disdained King David. Whenever he would win a battle somewhere, like in Ramah, I think it was, he's like, I just killed everyone in the city. I polished it. It's all ready for you to take over the city. If you, King David, don't take over the city, I'm going to keep it for myself. And if you think that's him being righteous, it's not being righteous. He was indignant towards David a lot. And I could see him on the battlefield going, well, if God is for us, if he's against us, doesn't matter. Be like men. Fight. Fight like men. Stop being a baby and fight. Quit crying. Quit whining. Just fight. Like, this guy was a man of war. I don't believe that he was a believer in God, in Jehovah God at all. Because if he was, he would have respected King David, but he didn't want anything to do with King David. He just followed rules, but he didn't care about life. How do we know this? King David wrote him a letter. He opened up the letter in front of Uriah the Hittite, looked at it, rolled it up, probably put his hand on Uriah's shoulders and like, good luck. And then sent him to the front, and arrows shot down and killed him along with the other valiant men. Joab was a wicked man as well. And King David paid for that. The sword never left his family after that. Lots of destruction because of that one action. My point is, Joab didn't even blink. He didn't even blink. What he should have done was look at it and go, this is horrible. I'm not doing this. Joab, you're not going to believe this. Look at this. Look at what he's telling me to do. I'm not going to do it because you're a righteous guy. I'm not going to do it. He should have done that. You today might go, nope, Joab has to follow every rule. He has to follow. The king told him to do this. No, it was in Joab's heart as well to kill Uriah. He had no problem doing it. Zero. Didn't even blush, didn't even blink. How do we know this? Well, if you go back to Jonathan, King Saul's son, took a little lick of some honey off of a stick, and King Saul said, "This guy is to be killed because I made a vow that nobody eats today." And so he pulled out his sword to kill his son Saul, and a bunch of people stood in front of Jonathan. Not Saul, Jonathan. Jonathan is Saul's son. And Jonathan licked some honey, and King Saul said, "You are as good as dead." And so a bunch of men stood in front of Jonathan and basically said, he's not going to die today. Sorry, ain't going to happen on my watch. These are righteous men. They stuck up for Jonathan. And and this is what Joab should have done. He didn't do it. He's a wicked man. Jonathan's men stood and said, "No, sorry, we're going to disobey the king's order to kill Jonathan because we had a great victory today, and you want us to kill him? No, we're not. We're not." Crazy, right? So again, when you see, "Who will bring me into the strong city? Who will lead me into Edom? Will not thou, O God, which cast us off?" This is someone that is a little bit bitter, going, "Well, it kind of looks like God isn't for us right now. Will you save us, God? Doesn't look like you're for us. Looks like we're on our own. And thou, God, which didst not go out with our armies," because we got a lot of people that got slaughtered. "You weren't with us. Are you that God that's not going to be with us this time?" And if you think about it from the perspective, this would happen when Israel would sin. God often wouldn't go out with them to battle. We know this with Joshua, a perfect man. Like, this guy was flawless. And when he showed up in Canaan, they were going to attack Ai. And after destroying Jericho, and one of his officers, Achan, took the cloak of Nimrod, which some people can argue and say that had the visibility, the properties of making you invisible. It's like a Jewish tradition or something like that. I don't know. I'm not a scientist. But this Nimrod, legend has it, would give people special powers to be able to hide themselves. Whatever it was, maybe it's camouflage, maybe it's a camouflage cloak that they can just blend in. But Achan desired that cloak from Nimrod himself, which was a mighty man. You can argue he was a giant. And Achan found it, and he found some gold and some silver and went to his tent and buried it. And that cost him his entire family. But before that happened, Joshua was trying to battle, I think it was the Amalekites were coming down to attack, and they got their butts handed to them. And Joshua's like, "What is going on here? I have no idea why we lost. Lord, how could you lead us into this land? Look at all the stuff you did for us, only for us to die here." And the Lord's like, paraphrasing, "Josh, quit being a baby. Somebody stole something. That somebody did something that they weren't supposed to do. They weren't to touch any of the statues, any of the gold, any of the silver that was supposed to be dedicated to the Lord." So then they cast lots, and they figured it out. There was Achan and his family, and they ended up stoning them and burning their entire family. But Joshua didn't know why the Lord wasn't with them. He's like, I lost a lot of good men today, and I don't know why. And then God later told him that it was because somebody had sinned in the camp. That's why he wasn't with them. And David would often, there'd be times in his life where he would speak to the Thummim and Urim, and he would ask God, shall I go out? And there'd be no answer, because he had done something bad by doing a census to basically go off to war, and he counted everyone. And this was actually Satan manipulating King David into doing a census, and God wasn't listening to him. It was very, very quiet for King David. People kind of forget that stuff. So I say all this because when you read Psalms, you're going to come across a psalm here and there that it's going to be like, wow, this looks like either somebody doesn't believe in God, or somebody's vengeful, asking God to avenge them, kill their enemies, destroy these wicked people. Sometimes it'll be chapters about, where are you, God? I can't hear you. And it's all because of the state that Israel was in corporately. Because we know historically that the 10 tribes of Israel, you can argue 99% of Israelites, the 10 northern tribes I'm talking about, did not believe in God, did not believe in Jehovah after King Solomon. When King Solomon died, Jeroboam became the king of Israel. They tore away from King Solomon, from his son Rehoboam, and split into two nations. The tribe of Judah continued to worship at the temple. The other 10 northern tribes moved away from temple worship. Instead, they worshiped calves, one in Bethel and one in Dan. And they worshiped Moloch, and they worshiped the Queen of Heaven. If you were to take a time machine today and land in the 10 tribes of Israel back then, you would go, these are pagans. These are heathens. They don't believe in Jehovah God. There's not one altar that is dedicated to the Lord. They are all different gods. Moloch, Ammon, Edom, Egypt, with all their gods. They're worshiping just about every other deity except Jehovah God. How do we know this? Well, the Levites actually got kicked out. So basically, the king said, you're not welcome here. And he built the calf in Bethel and another golden calf in Dan, because he didn't want them to worship Jehovah God in Jerusalem. He feared that they would go back to the king of Judah. So this is why Israel, the 10 northern tribes, got kicked out, is because they no longer worship God. They had prophets sent to them, and you could almost count on one hand how many people were left. About 7,000, give or take a few, were dedicated to God, because Elijah was complaining to God, saying, they've killed everyone that believes in you. I'm the only one that's left. So for Elijah to say that, that should tell you something. That should tell you how few people were left that actually worship Jehovah God. So now, when you get Psalms added to here, you could see the captivity from Judah being captive in Babylon, that some of these Psalms are being written throughout Israel's history. The Babylonians wanted Israel, when they captured the tribe of Judah, they wanted them to sing songs on the way back to Babylon. And they said, no, it's forbidden to worship outside of Jerusalem. It's forbidden, especially in a foreign land. So they took their harps, they took all their instruments and hung them on trees. They refused to worship God outside of Jerusalem because it was against their law. Moses said, I'm going to tell you where to celebrate all your festivals and feasts and everything, and where you dedicate and sacrifice all your animals and everything. It has to be in Jerusalem. It has to be in a city that I will choose. And now that they're being removed in Babylon, all that's being taken away from them. And they weren't even comfortable with the idea of worshiping God in song to the Babylonians on the way to Babylon. They said, nope, nope, we already messed up enough as it is. We're not going to be guilty of this also, worshiping God in a foreign land. We're not going to be guilty of that. I'm not talking about prayers and all this kind of stuff, but the idea of being celebratory, like this is the best day. Imagine singing a song that makes you feel so happy because you're in the promised land, and the Babylonians are trying to make you sing that on the way to Babylon. They wouldn't do it. They wouldn't do it. All right, so let's get into chapter 1. Hopefully this will help you read the Bible more and have a better devotion. So let's just go into Psalm chapter 1, and we'll see how far we get. Excuse me. I should have had some water today. All right. Psalm chapter 1, book 1, Psalms 1 to 41. That makes up book 1. Blessed is the man that walketh not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor standeth in the way of sinners, nor sitteth in the seat of the scornful, but his delight is in the law of the Lord, and in his law doth he meditate day and night. And he shall be like a tree planted by the rivers of water, that bringeth forth his fruit in his season. His leaf also shall not wither, and whatsoever he doeth shall prosper. The godly are not so, but are like the chaff which the wind driveth away. Therefore the ungodly shall not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the congregation of the righteous. For the Lord knoweth the way of the righteous, but the way of the ungodly shall perish. So there is a blessing in reading the book of Psalms. There's something special about meditating not only on the whole Bible, but also meditating on Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. It's good to meditate on it morning, afternoon, and evening. Psalm 2, why do the heathen rage, and the people imagine a vain thing? The kings of the earth set themselves, and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord and against his anointed, saying, let us break their bands asunder and cast away their cords from us. He that sitteth in the heavens shall laugh. The Lord shall have them in derision. Then shall he speak unto them in his wrath, and vex them in his sore displeasure. Yet have I set my king upon my holy hill of Zion. I will declare the decree the Lord has said unto me. Thou art my son. This day have I begotten thee. Ask of me, and I shall give thee the heathen for thine inheritance, and the uttermost parts of the earth for thy possession. Thou shalt break them with a rod of iron. Thou shalt dash them in pieces like a potter's vessel. Be wise now, therefore, all ye kings. Be instructed, ye judges of the earth. Serve the Lord with fear, and rejoice with trembling. Kiss the Son, lest he be angry and ye perish from the way, when his wrath is kindled but a little. Blessed are all they that put their trust in him. These two chapters are basically the foundation of Psalms. We get an introduction, why it's beneficial to meditate on his word, on the law. And then also the second chapter introduces us to our Messiah, Jesus Christ, the King of Kings, Lord of Lords, Lord of the universe, creator of everything. This is the God that died for us on the cross. Jesus Christ, God the Son. And it's very powerful when you begin to meditate on his word. You take it seriously, you take your devotional life seriously. If you do that, you can begin to hear the voice of God. Some of you might say, well, I've been struggling hearing the voice of God. Read more of the Bible. And if you are struggling because you can't hear him outside your head, read the Bible out loud, and he will speak to you out loud. That's it for today's video. I hope you've enjoyed this little devotion, and the next time we go into a psalm devotion, we're just going to jump right into it. We're just going to start reading it, and then I can share my thoughts as we go. But I felt it was beneficial to just give a little bit of a backstory as to how I approach the book of Psalms and obviously the Bible as well. But thanks, you guys. Thanks for sticking around. I'm going to go have a quick breakfast, and I appreciate you guys for hanging out with me this morning. That is awesome. I'll see you in another video. Bye for now.